Merrick, and I'm your guide beside for this session, and I'm hoping to steer a course through some seriously smart cities to some transformational mega projects via a new direction for Brisbane, and all before lunchtime. But we're going to start by exploring new frontier challenges for urbanists and how we adapt, embed, and harness the power of ubiquitous technology. Without a doubt, smart cities and big data are the new black. But as we grapple with the rapid urbanisation of our population, many of us are still really pretty hazy about how these concepts will help to build resiliency or protect the livability of our cities and regions. Put simply, harnessing the power of technology to collect, analyse and distribute information enables us to manage a city more efficiently to the benefit of its community and its environment. And here to discuss the application of a smart city approach, as well as the implications of remaining dumb, is our extremely intelligent panel of experts. So please do help me to welcome from Deloitte Access Economics, Associate Director Kelly Heaton, Louisa Carter, City Executive South East Queensland from Arcadis, and Tim Spencer, Executive Manager from Mulpha Norwest. Please join with me in welcoming them. So panel, let's just start with the basics. I think for some of us, we're a little bit afraid to engage with this debate because it sounds as if it's all about technology. And basically, haven't we been smart in how we manage cities ever since we had automated traffic lights? What does this really mean for us? Who'd like to kick us off? What is a smart city?
Okay, I'll kick us off. I think that, as you say, with the traffic light system, the light switch, and a whole lot of other engagements, we've been on this journey for a long time. And it's about technologies and using them in the best possible way. What we're on the threshold right now of, and I'm by no means any expert in this area, but it's the hooking up of the sensoring, the analytics that will occur. And this means that we're entering into a new analytical machine age, if you like.
That sounds quite scary, especially when cities are all for people. Do you have a different interpretation, Kelly?
Oh, well, I think my first thing is that don't let the language lock you out of the conversation in this particular area. So as Kate and I were talking about earlier, cities are about people and, it's about making the best place for the people. And there are some trends out there that are locking people out of the cities and the cities aren't working for them. So part of the Smart Cities agenda is making sure that we include all people in the future of, work and living and playing.
I actually think it's the connection of livability and productivity. A smart city for me is one that is actually moving from the knowledge-based economy that we see today to the entrepreneurial economy. And it's not just about business innovation, it's about how we approach our life and our culture. And for me, the smart city is one that's can grapple with the technological information overload that's coming through the IoT, and I think that the smart city is a learning city.
Okay, no jargon. IoT?
Internet of Things.
See, you're so jargonistic, you can't even remember the real words for it.
I've been on a journey for probably 3 months, and I've been into many a meeting and said, what the hell is IoT? And it's probably not a bad point to start with, I think, because it's probably the number one data crunch kind of question out there. What is IoT? And all it is just harnessing the big data. It's harnessing like the live information to a point where we can use it in a live manner in terms of our consumer behavioural change.
That's a great segue, and these guys, they thought they were coming here to listen to all the other fantastic speakers. In fact, they've come here to work quite hard for their lunch. So we might start with some of the pointed questions and focus on resilience for a moment, because maybe this is an area where the Internet of Things makes a major contribution. Particularly, I'm thinking about the future performance of our cities and the lived experience we have of them. So I might ask you, Louisa, are we talking about evolution or revolution when we're applying big data analytics to cities?
I'm glad you picked up on before that it could sound like it's quite scary, but I think really we're talking about evolution. We are immersing ourselves, we're engaging, we are getting new capabilities. And I suppose one of the points I've been thinking about is it just an evolution or is it an evolutionary plus? And so how do we make it that plus? And from my industry, my background in urban planning and architecture, we need to have a much better conversation about that. But I think we do have some immediate challenges. The challenges in resilience that are identifiable and set Brisbane, for example, on benchmarks internationally. If we don't deal with those, we'll always sit here. So our level of investment will always be like this. So I suppose I see analytics and data as a good opportunity to look at how we're doing things and optimise them better.
Can you give the guys in the audience who maybe have only the same level of education that I do around this subject, which is pretty much that big, and it's doubled in the last 2 days, when we talk about how we apply those analytics to the resiliency debate, can you give them a practical example of how it would help either in real time or predictively?
Yeah, there's two aspects to that, I think. So it's about which systems do we look at. Are they important for us to analyse on a stretch case if it's really bad? So, you know, wind, dust, noise, heat, water, energy, social factors. There's a lot of things that you can put into that bucket and think about. The second thing is about combined effects. So not only do we need to study them, we need to study them in a combined manner to look at. It's a way that we can do it. We've been doing this for decades in town planning, if you like, but we've got great new tools to do with it to do it now.
A bit of a follow-up question for you. I think I saw that you had written about the lack of a blueprint or a comprehensive kind of plan for this intersection between smartness and resilience. Do you think that, for all the panellists, Louisa might kick us off, is an important feature for the city, for the state, for the region? At what level do we need to apply that?
Again, there will be things about the technology needs exactly. You know, how many data centres, how much energy we're going to need, what kind of technological spines the city will need to have, how they're co-located with other infrastructure. But I think the key thing that's a bit flummoxing for us at the moment is that the leveraging of past investments with technology. And this is why, you know, the Transport for London have said that, you know, Uber is not a software, it needs to license in the streets. So that issue where public space and the public realm, local government space is leveraged for what are embedded networks and other things, it's an important economic piece. I think the way that it's rolling out now in one of my papers on embedded networks is that it is introducing a pricing cost, a cost of living penalty for urban regeneration, because it's the only way that we can get the infrastructure up and running quickly enough. And we just need to have a debate about it and get that sorted for the ultimate outcome, which is the customer experience in the cities and how wonderful they are, and we want people to invest in them.
So from your perspective, Tim, coming at it from the other direction, would it be helpful for you to be operating in an environment where there was a strong framework and you had that guidance or that overlay?
Would it be helpful to have more governmental influence on the developers' world? No. But I think there's definitely different levels, and I think we do need some overarching policy guidance, especially in regards to privacy and big data access. But at the same time, on an individual level or on a specific site level, my thoughts are that we need to move to a state where we are happy to fail. We need to move into an entrepreneurial mindset where we are happy to trial technology. We're happy to get in and give it a go, but for the whole world not to fall over when it doesn't work. We need to learn from those lessons and then go again. So for me, it's actually kind of how do you break it down into a microcosm, get out there, give something a go, not have to put massive amounts of dollars into the infrastructure, but just get started. And so for me, it's identifying what you want the technology to do, because these days you can probably get technology to do whatever you want. You know, the tech heads out there can actually deliver for you if you've got a clear vision of what you want. But then start small, but have a real kind of leverage growth plan that you can apply once it's successful, or you can manipulate it. For me, the smart city is one that will constantly keep evolving. And for me, the smart city is also kind of one that is re-engaging with research and R&D and education in a continual spectrum. You know, I went to uni back too far ago, and you know, I've never been back, right? That's the wrong attitude. Small and medium-sized businesses need to be engaging in R&D. For too long, R&D has been in the realm of the big business enterprise. It shouldn't be. It should be in the realm of the small SMEs. That's my thoughts.
So smart city, dumb people won't get us anywhere is effectively what you're telling me. Is there a culture or a philosophical overlay that we need to also take on board in order to be able to translate smart city-ness effectively? Does it go beyond the tech solution?
I think so, definitely. I think we've been seeing it in the papers in the Australian Fin Review. They've been constantly telling us how Australia is falling behind on the innovation platforms and the innovation mindset. You know, we look back at our short history of modern Australia and how we were very kind of innovative at the start of, trying to be politically correct there, but only 200 years ago we were very innovative. You know, I think we've started to get a bit lazy, but I don't think we've lost it. You know, I think we can, we're passionate people, we're a competitive people. I think that will drive us into the right frame of mind again. We just need to press the button and stop talking about it and start doing it.
You're a fantastic panellist because you give me great segues into the next question. So we're going to go back now to Kelly and talk a little bit about livability, because I'm a passionate devotee of Jane Jacobs, and I often wonder what would she say about all of this smart city-ness, and whether potentially we're in danger of making a smart city strategy one that's actually about the growth of Cisco Systems or Microsoft or any of the other major companies. How do we actually ensure that we keep people at the heart of this smart city conversation? What does it really do for me?
Well, you're a passionate devotee of Jane Jacobs, and I'm a passionate devotee of Saskia Sassen.
Oh, there we go.
And her whole philosophy is about cities are about people, and sometimes we lose sight of that fact. And particularly with the technological revolution, digital divide means that those who are young, well-educated, can engage in a smart city, can use a smart city to their advantage. But what we've got to keep in mind is that there are some people who are being increasingly, as she uses, expelled from the economy and where they live by the nature of these technological advancements. You know, we're in Brisbane, I don't think that's such a big issue, but Tim's from Sydney, and maybe, you know, these are some of the issues that the bigger global cities are starting to take into consideration. And you know, we want a city where our kids can grow up and where our kids will raise their kids. Cities are about people at the end of the day.
So how will it make a material, I'm sorry to push you on this, but I think for a lot of us, you know, eventually it's going to turn up on our rates bill. There'll be a smart city levy. What will I actually get for that? How will my life be better? And if anyone from City Council is here, that wasn't a suggestion. How will I actually get a greater sense of livability or lovability about my city if the city itself is smarter?
Well, what I'd hope is that you wouldn't actually even notice. Things would just become a little bit easier. So I saw a great example the other day. There's a city in the Netherlands where they've developed an app for older citizens so that when they turn up at the traffic lights know that they're going to take longer to cross the road, so they give them more time. Things like that, where you go, that is a marvellous idea. It's making somebody's life easier, a little app, and off we go. So it's things like that where, you know, there will be some big catalyst changes in the way that we live our lives, but, you know, to me, I think it's more those incremental changes in just making the way that we live, work, and play a little bit easier. You know, we'll see it in economic dividends. That's all well and good, but hopefully we see it in our lives as well.
If we end up seeing a smart city rate addition, we've failed as a nation. Smart cities should be delivering things cheaper and simpler to us. We should be increasing our productivity and our livability by harnessing this technology. You know, it shouldn't be driving us, we should be driving it.
Is that quantifiable?
Yeah, at the moment, you know, we're developing or the next evolution or revolution of Norwest Business Park, and we're being inundated from service providers wanting to deliver infrastructure for us for free, but we've got to sign our life away to them for the next 10 years. And at the moment, we're kind of sitting there saying just woo, woo, woo. You know, we understand that you're going to end up making a lot of money out of this. You know, it shouldn't necessarily be going back into private hands. It should be being delivered, and this is a big issue in Sydney, back to the cost of living equation. So, you know, cheap electricity, you know, cheaper water, cheaper garbage collections, all of that type of cost of living is a massive issue in Sydney.
So let's just pick up a little bit about your experience at Norwest and, you know, maybe preface it. There was an article in the Guardian Online, I think it was back in 2014 now, and it talked about whether in the new age of ubiquitous technology, we're all unwittingly becoming unpaid data clerks, because every time we touch a phone or a smart device or all sorts of other computer packages, we're actually leaving an imprint that is setting data out there. How do you harness the people side of your real estate in Norwest? How do people actually feature in creating data that you're able to use to manage your environment or experience differently?
For us, it's really getting insight into consumer behaviour. So, the cities are actually Australian cities are probably the worst at collecting consumer behaviour and then putting KPIs in place to measure the success of our cities. I think Australia's got a long way to go with that. But for me, on a citywide basis, if I can collect the data, then I can turn things around in terms of making that city more efficient, or I can put services where people want them. It's basically the new age version of you create a park, you've got grass in the park, and everyone walks through the park that way and ends up killing the grass in that thing. What do? You go and put a footpath through that exact section. It's just the new age version of that for me.
So I'm curious to know how, I think I also read that you only need 150 likes on Facebook, Instagram, or some other social media for any analytics package to actually be able to predict everything that you may want to do with your life and sell to you effectively. Is that what happens to the people on Norwest, or how do you actually, what's the platform through which they interact with you to provide that data?
Yeah, well, look, we're reviewing and we're going through this process at the moment in regards to how we control it, what the platform is. For me, being human-centric has to be the key. And so we're looking to drive it through the actual Norwest Community Association. So we're looking to drive it through the community portal. So we're just kind of looking at the policy settings, and this is the big umbrella question in regards to all of that data. Whose data is it? Is it ours? Is it the people themselves? Whatnot. And I think I'm mentally working through it myself. I'm an open data. I start at the open data scenario and then start to think, we just got to make sure people can't mine it down into the individual. So, I don't mind that if you track me and you end up knowing what my favourite coffee shop is, and I don't mind if you know how I get to work, but I mind when you can actually look down and say, well, that's Tim Spencer. I know where he is. You just got to protect that level of personal information.
And so let's just go back to this whole idea of big data, open data. Again, I'm not really even sure I understand the difference between when people talk about it's open data. I don't really know what that means. So that might be something else we just need to provide a little bit of explanation about. But Louisa, how do you imagine that resilience in its broadest sense is going to benefit from big data and open data?
If we look at the 20th century, in each technical engineering discipline, significant developments in their modelling capabilities has occurred. And our cities, Australian cities have benefited from these packages. So now we'll be looking at how that is about integrated analysis. A machine can do incredible amounts of predictive analysis to find the best types of opportunities. An example, if you're not aware or have had a look at Virtual Singapore, which is the most complex and complete digital twin of a city in the world. And an example is the Singapore government, they wanted to do that, okay, so that's how they've done it. It wasn't very expensive. I do know the price of it, but I can't say. And when you look at 10 billion plus hitting Brisbane, this was a very low cost, very low. Anyway, the local government said, we're really interested in green roofs for Singapore. How will that help our heat island effect, which is a resilience challenge? And so because they had a very deep model, they were able to understand that in reality, only 15% of the roofs in Singapore City were going to be suitable. That was a quick analysis because they'd built up the model. So they really had to look at that from a policy perspective to see, well, how will we intervene in that marketplace? Is it going to be by direct benefit and approach to those players, which would be, the kind of thing that I think Tim is looking for. And it goes to that you mentioned before about the managerialism. And I really agree that there's a big piece in modern governance about a managerial entrepreneurialism, which says, what can we do to facilitate that? We do need regulations, of course, but really the facilitation of the smart city is about saying, what do we want our citizens to be? And I half the time think, am I working on Skynet? You know, and it's like, oh my God, you know. But we've got to get in there and make it work for us. And I've been doing quite a lot of research to find where in any international legislation it says that a robot is to benefit humans, you know, Asimov's humans must flourish. And the European Parliament are the most ahead, but there's no legislation that I can find like this. It would go back into some very high level legislation, but to me that's important. And if you think about our habitats going to become a big machine that face recognises us, that, you know, pulses marketing at us and, you know, whatever it's happening, what's the effect in just decades on human physiology, on culture that's emerged over decades? So those are some of the sorts of challenges. But for me, the resilience piece is just, we'll definitely be able to spend less on repair and more on planning.
So I'd like to pick up on 2 points there. The easy one is, so from the predictive model that they put together around the rooftops in Singapore, could they also extrapolate how greening the roofs was going to potentially reduce the cost of electricity or cooling, or so they could actually tangibilise the outcome of that policy decision too from the same model?
Yeah, I think the thing, I recognised all of this a long time ago, and that's why I've mainly worked in the engineering part of the industry, because they have been a data-rich area for cities. But there's a big piece in public amenity, in basically the memes, I call them, a non-genetic transfer of information, the toolkit of urban designers and architects, how that occurs and what's valuable about it. That's not really analytically captured in most city models and analysis.
So let's just pick up on the other side, which is the sort of Blade Runner end of the spectrum, where they do recognise us by our biometry and our pulse and God knows what else. How do we overcome the resistance or the fear factor that people have? And you know, I go back to, because I probably, like Tim, I'm relatively advanced in years now, and university is a long time ago, but I remember when people were talking about don't have a computer in your room because NASA will be able to see you through the screen, and people were genuinely afraid of that. And I think in some ways we've still got a generational culture to overcome of fear of embracing this at a personal level, fine potentially at a governmental level, analytics, big data maybe, but how do we overcome that personal fear? I am looking at you, Kelly.
Oh, gosh. As you were saying that, I was just thinking, yeah, my nana turns her phone off. I don't think I've ever actually turned my phone off unless it's doing an update. And she does that for privacy reasons. So it is definitely a challenge, is this intergenerational divide around how we use and understand technology. You know, I've got a nephew who thinks nothing of playing with his iPad, and he can do it, and he's 2. You know, my mum still doesn't understand how to use hers properly. So if we're talking about smart cities and things where you've got to be able to switch this on and you get this happening in your home, like, well, let's be real, this isn't going to happen overnight. We've got so much learning that needs to go into this and how we interact with these technologies. But as long as we're educating our workforce around this, hopefully it first turns up in the economy. You know, we did some work with Google, and just the value that the economy is getting through the additional choice of consumers by, you know, the products that Google provides to us. It's just a search platform, but the economic productivity from that is extraordinary. It's the size of a small industry in Australia. So there are technologies out there that you know, are changing our economy. And now it's about, well, how do we change the lives of people in a more micro aspect of this? Because the big picture will do it by itself.
Who takes the lead in that? Who, if the citizen isn't motivated to, how do we make sure we don't leave them behind? Who takes a leadership position?
That is an excellent question.
Very political, means she doesn't have an answer. That means, ladies and gentlemen, you're the ones who have to take the leadership position, I think.
I think the government's got to take the leadership on the privacy laws. And I think it ties into the resilience, and it ties into helping people not be scared of where we're going. I think at the end of the day, it is scary how much technology is impacting our lives, and the massive resilience question that I throw out there, and is a big component of what we're looking at in terms of the city we're creating is people's mental health. Now, technology typically actually hurts your mental health. You know, looking at an iPad, we all know you should probably only have, you know, a limited amount of screen time a day, especially for a 2-year-old. I'd be careful with that. But you shouldn't be doing, you know, certain activities at night when you hop into bed just before you're wanting to sleep. You know, you shouldn't be looking at your iPhone and the high density screen going on in front of you. And our family has set some rules around that. I break them all the time, looking at emails at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and then having troubles getting back to sleep. But I think that's part of the education, and I think at the moment we're wowed by technology. I'm actually enthused by the millennials and the younger generations coming, in the sense that they actually can, I'm seeing them having the smarts and the capability to leave their phones behind. I think our generation is still hooked to the phone. But I see people evolving and moving beyond that because it's not new to them. They've grown up with it. So I think it's, for me, in our developments, the green roofs ties into the vertical green revolution going on in terms of getting grass and trees and vegetation up through the buildings. But the connection to nature and connection to the environment, connection to night and day is still really super important for our health. Physically and mentally. So, you know, I think the cities we're creating are fantastic, and I love living in a city, but it's also ensuring that we have the opportunities to get out into nature and still feel the environment and be a part of it. I think that's probably our number one resilience task or tool, I think, to improve resilience into the future.
At a personal and a city-based level.
Yeah. And the other side of resilience is obviously flexibility in everything we do in regards to continuing to be able to evolve and not be delivering big infrastructure that can't evolve. You know, we kind of look at the oil industry and we think, you know, such massive investments have been made into the car and the oil industries that we can't just turn it off. I think in the future every industry we look at, we've got to work out how we can continue to evolve that industry without having to be have the big axe over our heads in regards to the amount of money that's been invested in the past. We've got to be able to move quickly. We're into a world of accelerating change and accelerating pace. You know, we can't be held to ransom by historical investment monies. You know, we've got to turn a buck quick and then get to the next thing.
So let's just change tack for a second. I was actually waylaid on the way in here this morning, and an interested party said, you've got to ask the question about, this is all fine if you're building on a greenfield site and we'll just embed from a tabula rasa and off we'll go, it'll all be great. But what about, how do we embed this? How do we retrofit this into a city that's already a city of a couple of million people, one of the largest local government areas in the world? Is that even possible? Louisa, you might like to start with that.
Well, obviously, I think it's going to be very important for us to understand where the government needs to show some policy guidance. But beyond that, it'll be, I think there is a bit of a, you know, making precincts in cities is really what we're about now. And that's to a large strategic agenda, for example, urban consolidation. And so now in those precincts where they come on, the capability to transform the city is being delivered by, more or less, by consortia and contractors. So that responsibility is a significant responsibility, and it's great that that's able to occur, but the interplay between the two is something that we really need to understand a little better.
And how are you seeing that play out, Kelly?
I don't know, I just, you know, take it to a personal level. I live in a Brisbane suburb where it was all Queenslanders and now it's all townhouses, and if there's a slight wind gust, my internet drops out because there's just not enough infrastructure for the population density that's there now. So we've still got a while to go before my suburb becomes smart city. We've just got to get reliable internet. But, you know, kind of in terms of retrofitting it to the city, you know, I love Brisbane, and Brisbane's my favourite city in the whole world, and I think that we can do this. If this is the city that we want, let's plan the city for us. You know, we don't have to take the new technology that Silicon Valley is developing. Let's develop the Brisbane technology. What do we want? You know, do we want to be able to let our old people cross more at the lights, or do we want, you know, do we want more parks, or let's design that city and use smart cities strategies to get that off the ground, but don't let smart cities design our city for us.
Great answer, very political too. So, Tim, was it easy?
Well,
Norwest as an almost smart city while waking up, was it easy?
No, we've only just started our journey, and the challenge we've got is actually taking the community on the journey with us in regards to, I guess, the extent of development versus the investment equation. You don't get investment without allowing development in, and Sydney is hugely impacted at the moment by traffic. So, you try and build anything in Sydney at the moment, and most people will argue against it in terms of the traffic that will be generated out of that development. Norwest Business Park is one of the best places in Sydney in the sense that we've got 2 new railway stations. There's nowhere else in Sydney or no other development in Sydney that's getting 2 new railway stations. But we are still being impacted by the traffic equation. For us, the retrofit, we've been going basically now for 27 years into a smart city. We've got 30,000 workers, 6,000 residents to date. The retrofit is difficult, but we're moving down the line of it's a mindset. Retrofit where we can simply and quickly, and then just let it evolve and let it keep going. So I'm not scared of the retrofit because we're not trying to tackle it in a massive way. We're not trying to deliver the NBN and deliver masses of cable through our 377 hectares. We're picking it off in little micro precincts and whatnot. But so for us, the retrofit's a mindset of giving it a go. If it fails, don't worry about it. Let's learn from it. Let's use the whole community as a test bed and kind of take everyone on the journey. That's what we're trying to do.
So let's just think about the fast forwarding to 2030. Let's be really ambitious. We've got Internet of Things embedded everywhere, so ubiquitously and seamlessly that we don't even know. Where do all of those streams of analytics go to? So if we've got analytics coming back from energy and analytics coming back from water, and Google is still telling everyone when I leave my house that it's 8 minutes to Tenerife and the traffic is moderate, where does all of that data get converged so that we can then disseminate it where it needs to go? Where is that governance?
It's just available to be used, I suppose, and everybody who wants to, you get it and you analyse your question. I think for me, the idea that it can be analysed across sectors for outcomes is where we really need to be thinking. So the data, it's really not, it's important, but it's how we are asking the questions of that.
So will it be not just local government, state government, will have cyber government as well to make sure that we've actually got an entity looking at this holistically?
Well, it's a really big issue. So if you're talking to Accenture, IBM, and all the big players in the Dassault systems in the city space, basically they have technicians in there who are technical people that know about cities, engineers, architects, but they are working with the coders to write codes that says, could say, this is more important than that. Our industry needs to be saying that because this is the history of our disciplines and our knowledge. And so really there is a point where a supplier's coder is actually writing the city of the future.
Is the most powerful person in the city.
In theory, yeah.
So we won't care about the mayoral election in future. What about your perspective? Sorry, I cut you off, Tim.
Oh, no, that's the big issue in regards to my mind. Who owns the data? Very scary for me is how much Google knows about us as Australians. We're not in control of that. I'm very passionate Australian, and I think Australia should be in control of its data and give it out in a measured way. And so, should the local councils be collecting the data and be the custodians of it? It's the big question. And for me, that's the open data question in regards to, if it's open data, then everyone can get in there and use it. It's the dashboards you've got to put over the top of the open data to ensure that people can't mine it into the individual. But I find that's probably the biggest policy question out there in regards to smart cities.
So, Kelly, let's talk about something that Rem Koolhaas had to say recently. He was asking why is the argument or the debate centred around smart cities is definitely going to be an improvement? What about if smart cities is a transgression? What about if it doesn't cause improvement in quality of life and livability? How would you think to that?
Well, I think this gets back to a point I was trying to make earlier around smart cities won't be great for everybody. There will be some people, unless society decides to bring them for the journey, they will be left behind, and the gap between the haves and the have-nots will get wider. This is the same for all technologies. This is not just smart city technology. So, broader issue, but smart cities gets into the way that we live our lives. So this is not just about locking people out of the economy, it's about locking people out of place, which to me is just, extraordinary that that could happen in this day and age. So to me, the transgression is more around making sure that smart cities don't leave people behind.
And how do we do that? That sounds very expensive.
You go for
I was
it.
going to mention there's a Human Rights Commission paper on e-inclusion, and they've written it, of course, their pieces are regarding disability and how building management systems and things like that in the home aren't really have the user interface. But if you take the idea of an e-inclusion along these lines, it's a significant issue. So understanding, here's an example, robotics and health it's huge. And I could have 2 replacement hips that are actually robotic. My home could be incredibly supportive of me in many ways, reminding me. And in theory, I could live to 150 years, supported by place. So how is that going to be the most, the best evolved version of that we can get that deals with the transitions, deals with the those that become left out, priced out, inaccessible, whatever it is. And these are the important questions. I think that the front end of the industry, the take-up, the luxury, the commercial settings, the street, the vibrant places, they will to some extent look after themselves in the marketplace. But an overarching ethics of what our cities will be when they're smart and what that's for, I think that's going to be just such an important debate in the next few years.
So we were having a discussion a little bit earlier on, Kelly and I, in the speakers' room, and you've just been involved in a report, Confidently Queensland, I think it was called, and you were mentioning the idea that whilst we're thinking about this sort of up here, the reality is that smart cities is not all about productivity and economics and economic output, and you had a pretty interesting comment to make around what actually makes a city competitive is that people want to live there and they can live their best lives there. So it has the highest degree of livability and lifestyle appeal possible, and that's how we keep attracting and retaining people. And it's those people that make us productive, that make us economically successful and competitive and so on. So what is going to be the impact of not being smart? Now, how do we see a decision to be dumb or a decision to do nothing, which is kind of where I'm hearing we're almost at a Rubicon now, where we're either deciding not to or it's going to happen at such a slow pace that we get overtaken. What will we look like in 2030 if we don't take action?
I don't think it's not necessarily going to happen. It's about the price and what contracts and what the procurement model is for that. So here's an example. I'm aware of an example in Brisbane for telco services in a new apartment, and the package was prior 1,000 gigabytes for $120 from Telstra, an embedded network for telco, $99 for 100 gigabytes, and then you pay. So I think that's a significant issue, because data and energy, they're the 2 networks that are really hitting the papers.
I think our infrastructure will start failing without getting there. You'll see traffic congestion becoming horrendous. That's already an issue. We're already seeing the electricity network starting to fail. We're already seeing most simple things in regards to garbage collection issues. We have to get there, or else our cities will go backwards and become more volatile. I think we need to bring smart city technology on to ensure that our productivity is increasing, but at the same time we've got to do it from the human perspective, or we will all go mentally crazy. So I think it's a foregone conclusion that we'll get there. It's just when we'll get there.
And how?
I think my fear is that Australia will lose its competitive advantage in terms of our status in the world. And as, I guess, the importance of digging things out of the ground lessons, we've got to, change what we're good at. And I think, the smart city angle and innovation and technology is the opportunity for us. And I'm super excited that we're getting a space division or whatever they're calling it.
With the worst acronym in the world. I'm not sure if anyone's seen it yet.
You might have to share that with them because I'm not sure anyone has seen it yet.
Well, the first 3 letters are ASS.
Not ideal.
Someone in government didn't think that one through.
In the audience here, you've probably got about 135 people, something like that. That's 135 potential champions and advocates that you're sending away today. If you had one thing you want every one of them to go away and do when they leave us tomorrow evening, what would it be, Louisa?
I would say we need to challenge all our clients to look for the innovative ways and the optimisation in their business. And these are the new technologies. Find out and give it a go. Pretty much what like Tim was saying before.
Kelly?
I think it's about changing the lens on the conversation so that it's not using jargons about smart cities. It's asking people, well, what kind of city do you want to live in? What is going to help you live your best life, and how do we do that in Brisbane?
Tim?
And Sydney.
We don't care about Sydney. No.
Yeah. No, what I'd love all you guys to do is actually go out and in your businesses think about, how you evolve your product. And for us this year, we stood up and we put our hand up and we said we cannot continue to evolve our development product without collaborative partners. The world is becoming too complex. There's too many overlays on products now that you just can't think of yourself. So for me, I think that's the entrepreneurial thought process of, who should I be talking to? How can I continue to learn lessons about my own product and keep it evolving? So for us, aging in place is a really important one for us that we've hooked up with Newcastle's Hunter Medical Research Institute. But doubled back on that in regards to health and design. We've hooked up with some universities about digital placemaking. We've hooked up with some graphic designers and old school industrial engineers in regards to how can we physically change some of our product. For us, I just want you guys to realise that the way forward is not, how you've been doing it in the past. And the best way to evolve your product is by talking to people. Just get out there and talk to as many people as you can.
This is the horrible question that I didn't prep you for in advance, okay? I don't have a game up my sleeve, but this is my parting gesture. If you had to be a smart city in the world somewhere, which smart city would you be, Louisa? That's so terribly unfair because they've got 5 seconds.
Too long. I'm going to go with New York, and is really starting to look at some real smarts. It is that Arcadis is doing some very major projects there in city resilience to make the city stronger. That means that for that whole east side area of New York, it'll be smart, it'll be resilient, and it'll be repackaged and New York Wall Street protected. So, yeah.
Love the Big Apple. Kelly?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not pandering to the crowd, but Brisbane, this is my home. Start here.
Tim?
I think the question was what type of smart city we want to be.
It was if you were a smart city, which smart city would you be? But you can answer the question any way you choose. You've been very game today.
Yeah, right. San Fran. I think San Fran has a fantastic natural geography setting. It has a lovely mindset of people. And it's making big inroads into transport and in integrated transport. And I think that's going to be a super big key for every city in the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd really like it if you could join with me in thanking our extremely game panellists, Louisa Carter, Kelly Heaton, Tim Spencer, very much indeed.